This week in Sha'ar Talmud, we covered the two Tosfos on Daf Daled Amud Beis in Kiddushin. The first Tosfos is Me'ikra Din of Pircha Shechein Yotzi B'Kesef. So the Gemara, this is the Maskana of the Gemara. Why at the end of the day can we not learn from a Kavach Homer, from an Amma Ivriya to an Isha, to a woman, that she can be acquired by Kesef, just like an Amma Ivriya is acquired by Kesef? Because Me'ikra Din, we have a Chiluk. There's a basic difference between the two. An Amma Ivriya can go out with Kesef. So since she can go out with Kesef, so that's why she can go in with Kesef, and that makes sense. And therefore we can't learn the Kavach Homer, and we need the Pasuk Yikach. Comes along Tosfos and has a question. Why did the Gemara state that the difference between the two was Kesef, that she could go out with Kesef and Amma Ivriya, when there are also other differences? She could go out in the 6th year. We know when Amma Ivriya goes out in the 6th year, she goes out in the 49th year, and she also goes out when there's Simanim, when she starts to see the sign of womanhood. So if that's true, that she goes out in all those other cases, so that's another essential difference between her and an Isha, who does not go out in any of those cases and needs to get to go out. So why did the Gemara bring those possibilities as a difference between the two? Tosfos answers that we wanted to make a difference that would also cover the possibility of making a Kavach Homer from a Shivka Kananis. In other words, by a Shivka Kananis, all those things don't apply, and maybe we'd make a Kavach Homer from her. Just like a Shivka Kananis goes out with Kesef, since she doesn't get acquired by Bia, so all the more so, an Isha who was acquired by Bia, she could go out with Kesef. And it doesn't apply to the Chilukim because she doesn't go out in the 6th year, the 49th year, or Simanim. Therefore, we wanted to kill two birds with one stone. We wanted to make sure that we didn't come back later and make a Kavach Homer from a Shivka Kananis. The Marashah says in this, so we can see from Rashi that Rashi doesn't have this difficulty. Why? Because Rashi stated, "V'kesef chashuv ba levadusa chashuv nam leknusa." The fact that kesef is important enough for her to go out with, we can assume it's important enough for her to go in with. Rashi learns the Gemara Dafka, because the chiluk that the Gemara says is kesef, and it's very specific. Comes along Tosfos and has a second difficulty. He brings Hari Yaakov Moralines, who says, wait a second, Enoch and Namu, we can't learn from an Amma Ivriya to an Isha that she's coming with Kesef from a Kavach Homer, but we could learn it from a Hekesh. And if we could learn it from a Hekesh, well then we won't need the pasuk of Ki Yikach. What Hekesh are we talking about? We're talking about the Hekesh in Kiddushin on Daf 16a that says, Shtar Manailan. Where do we know that a shtar will work by an Amma Ivriya? In other words, you can acquire her with a shtar. It says, Amrula, Amakra, Im Acheres Yikaklo. If you take a wife, we're talking about someone who took an Amma Ivriya and then he took a wife. V'hiksha kasuv la'acheres. And we made a hekesh from the word acheres. Ma acheres makne b'shtar. Who's not talking about a woman is acquired by a shtar. Af Amma Ivriya makne b'shtar. Also an Amma Ivriya will be koneh from shtar. So we learn the din of shtar by an Amma Ivriya from an Isha. Comes along the Tosfos and says, let's learn something else from this hekesh. Let's take this hekesh and learn in the opposite direction. Just like an Amma Ivriya is koneh with kesef, so too let an Isha koneh with kesef, so we can use the hekesh in the opposite direction. And where do we know that an Amma Ivriya is konim for kesef? Because it says ifta. We learned there that since she goes out with kesef, so too she comes in with kesef. Now that we know that by an Amma Ivriya, we can now extend it with the other hekesh back to an Isha. The ein mashivan ala hekesh. What does he mean by that? It means the chilek that the Amma Ivriya goes out with kesef is not a problem with anymore. That's the chilek the Gemara brought. Why you can't learn from a Kavach Homer. But if you're learning from a hekesh, ein mashivan ala hekesh. We don't make chilukim like that. We don't make chilukim in the pratim dinim from one side to the other. Since it's true that she goes out with kesef on one side, which is the Amma Ivriya, we'll also extend it to an Isha. And we can't say that they're different because ein mashivan on a hekesh. We can't ask on a hekesh. A hekesh is going to override the difference from the fact that she goes out with kesef. Comes along the Tosfos, it gives two answers. One answer would be that if we were learned from a hekesh and an akinami, we could learn from the hekesh. But if we were learned from the hekesh, we would think that you need two prutas to marry a woman. You would think, just like by an Amma Ivriya, one pruta is not enough, and you have to acquire it with two prutas. So you would think that would also be true by a woman, because you're learning from a hekesh in terms of the kinyan kesef. That's the first answer that Tosfos gives. The second answer that Tosfos gives is that, wait a second, Kesef itself, that it works by an Amma Ivriya, is learned from the fact that she goes out with Kesef. If she goes out with Kesef, so too we say she goes in with Kesef. That's fundamental and cannot be extended to the case of an Isha where she goes out with a get. We just said a second ago, Ein Mashivan al Hekesh. Yeah, that's true by other dinim. But if the only reason that we know that the kesef would work as an acquisition is the fact that she goes out with kesef, that wouldn't be called ein mashivin al hekesh. Because we removed the cause for the law. The only cause is the fact that she goes out with kesef, so she goes in with kesef. We can't say that by an isha where she does not go out with kesef and requires a get. That's the two answers that Tosfos gives. The next Tosfos is also on the answer of the Gemara. The Gemara made a chilik between an Ama Ivriya and an Isha, that an Isha does not go out with kesef, and an Ama Ivriya does go out with kesef. And therefore you cannot make the Kavachomer. What was the Kavachomer? What that an Ama Ivriya you cannot acquire her with beer by living with her, and you can acquire her with kesef. Surely an Isha that you can acquire with beer, you should be able to acquire with kesef. The assumption is that all three kinyanim should work. So surely in a case where one of the kinyans does not work, and the other kinyan works like kesef, surely in a case where beer should work, well, kesef should work also. And we made a chiluk, you said you can't learn an Isha from an Ama Ivriya, because an Ama Ivriya goes out with kesef, and that's the reason why she goes in with kesef, which is not true by a woman who requires the get. Comes along Tosfos and says, forget about that Kavachomer. Ain't no chinami, the Gemara, the chiluk at the end of the Gemara is going to answer up that Kavachomer. But I have another Kavachomer where the chiluk will not answer. What will be the Kavachomer? Let's not talk about the people, let's talk about the kinyanim themselves. What that bia does not work by an Ama Ivriya, and kesef does work, so surely if you have bia, you'll have kesef. But I'm not talking about the people. I'm talking about the kinyanim himself. I see, again, the premise is that all the kinyanim should work. So if in a case where one case where bia does not work, and kesef does work, so surely in a case where bia does work, kesef should work. And you can't answer me that an Ama Ivriya goes out with kesef, that's why she comes in with kesef, because we're not talking about an Ama Ivriya. We're talking about the kinyanim, and we still have a kosher cane. Comes along Tosfos and says, no, even though that the final answer is not going to knock out the kosher cane, but the answer before will knock out the kosher cane. Because we will say, Yavama Tochiach. We see from Yavama that even though it has bia, kesef doesn't work, and that knocks out the kosher cane, essentially knocks out the kosher cane. And this Gemara Kiddushin comes along and says, Einochinami, we had that knockout, which was Yavama Tochiach, but then we removed it. How do we remove it? By saying that Yavama doesn't have shtar. So why, in this case, don't we again say the Yavama doesn't have shtar, and therefore the kasha will come back of Yavama Techiach? Comes along the Gemara Kiddushin and explains that's when we're talking about the people, the cases, that Yavama has shtar, and therefore he can't prove. But if we talk about the kinyanim themselves, well, we didn't remove the kosher cane. What do we care that Yavama doesn't have shtar? You still prove from Yavama that the kosher cane falls off. Why? Because Yavama has bia and it doesn't have kesef. So that's the end of the kosher cane.